Aurora, I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to jump on the podcast and have a conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Walter. I'm looking forward to helping the listeners turn their words into wealth.
All right. Um, so, I mean, there's a few things I want to cover, but what I'd like to start with is aside from your book or books, is there a book that you like to gift or reread on our
I
regular?
reread a lot of books, and I think the one that I have recommended and gifted the most is the book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And I really love that book because it says talent isn't born, it's grown, and here's how. And in that book, The Talent Code, the author presents 3 ways to grow your talent. One is you got to turn the engine on, you got to want it. So that, for sales is really key. You can teach sales skills all you like and communication skills all you like, but if the person doesn't want to make a sale, they're sabotaging their success. So nobody can turn on somebody else's got to have it, got to want it. So first thing is turn on the ignition. And the second thing is deep practice right at the edge of your skill. So not to be just phoning it in, but always whatever you're doing, whether you're playing tennis or having a sales call or being interviewed on a podcast, doing your absolute best, but don't you throw you in the deep end. So don't be playing with an Olympic caliber tennis player, but play with somebody who's just a little bit better than you. So deep practice at the edge of your ability. And then the third thing to grow your talent is to have a mentor or a coach or a trainer, which I'm sure you provide that function yourself, Walter. So I really like the book, The Talent Code.
I love it. I have not had somebody mention that book, and those three things are so critical, especially with sales. We call it sales DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and if they have a weakness or a challenge there, if they're not willing to recognize that there's a weakness or a challenge, and they don't recognize it and they don't want to work on it, there's no sense in training. There's no sense in coaching. There's really nothing else that we can do. Right? It's
Yeah,
exactly what you said.
yeah.
And then
The other thing that book point, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah, just it's working on that edge, right? When I
It,
played
it,
tennis, I was a 3-5 and I wanted to be a 4-0, so I always played with 4-0 guys that and
yeah.
gals who could kick my butt. But if I could just hang with them for a little bit, it felt good. So that's another a great
Well,
idea.
I talk about this a little bit in my book, Turn Words into Wealth, as well, but Daniel Coyle also talks about it in the Talent Code. And he talks about how when we are showing up right at the edge of our ability and trying to be excellent, not just good enough, we're actually laying down myelin. We are actually rewiring our brain. And we can do this at any age. It's all about being right at the edge of your capability and shooting for excellence. And we can change the speed at which the neural impulses go in our brain from about 2 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour. So, whether you are making a sales presentation or making a sales call or you're playing tennis, it doesn't matter what the activity is, whether it's physical or mental or verbal, or just listening is also a skill. You can actually 10x, or sorry, 100x your capability, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's huge. I didn't know that. So just by playing on that edge where you're just trying to get a little bit better, that will speed things up.
That will speed things up. It's like what fires together wires together. So in your brain, when you make a connection or you actually physically do something or think something, or even if you visualize something, you're making a connection. And at first, if you've never thought that thing or done that thing before, it might be just a billy goat trail. But the more you do it, it becomes like a paved two lane paved road, and then it becomes a super highway. So the more you keep doing it, it makes it broader, which makes it faster. Of course, there can be problems with this. If you've got PTSD and you have repetitive negative thoughts, you get the super highway of that. So we want to focus on the things that we want to achieve and visualize the things that you want, whether it's making a sale or, I don't know, making a peaceful day. prosperous day. We want to focus on what we want. But I do have a sales story that I think that you will enjoy. So when I was in my 20s, my husband and I started a company. We had to figure out what company we could start with no money because we had no money. But he was a sailor, and he was also very good at sales. He was trained at Xerox, so they, really
Sure.
train good salespeople. I, on the other hand, was more of an academic. I come from an academic family. My father is an economist. And so we started a company, and we ended up selling boats, selling yachts in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And I want to share a terrible sales mistake that I made, and then the breakthrough that actually took that company from a struggling little company to a multiple seven-figure company a year. So at first, well, the good idea was I thought, oh, how can I add more value? How can we add more value? Which is, I think, the key to any kind of sales. When you think about the customer's point of view, how can you add more value? And I realized that we could add more value by adding tax benefits to selling the boats. We were setting up a rental fleet. There were tax benefits in Canada that were very substantial for rental apartments. And I asked the million-dollar questions. I wonder if we could do this with boats. The answer was, yes, we could. So there was a 7% investment tax credit and a 33 and a third straight line depreciation, which meant the year that somebody bought the boat, they could get more money back in taxes than they had put down as a deposit. So they were cash flow positive from get-go. And I had all this, training as an economist. My father's an economist. I studied honors economics at UBC. But, well, that was a breakthrough idea. I fumbled the ball in terms of sales because I was so excited about the numbers. I had IT bulletins. I was explaining all the details, and I gave people like a fat 120-page document showing if they had this down payment or that down payment or whatever their marginal tax rate. This was not a good approach. So basically what I had done was I made the common mistake that educated people make is they skip the steps that are required before you go to that step of detail. And there's 3 steps to proper communication with neuroscience. And while people were certainly impressed with the level of attention to detail, they were like, whoa, I really need to get a tax attorney involved here. And they got, nervous, understandably. But the breakthrough came when, instead of giving people all that much information to start off with, I stumbled onto the proper neuroscience of communication and stumbled is not quite right. I thought a lot about how to communicate. And you could have 10% personal use. So the winning line was 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter. So 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter, because 10% personal use, it'd be 5.2 weeks. That was like a short, attention-grabbing, benefit-driven, but curiosity-sparking statement. And then we had a beautiful, gorgeous, full-color brochure that was only, two pages. And then after they were ready to put down their deposit, I would give them all the documents to show their accountant. And that ability to communicate more clearly got us on TV, got us profiled. We were on the front page of a local magazine, BC Business Magazine, and it changed our whole business from a struggling business with 2 kids that didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, that were probably going to go out of business anytime soon, to a multi-million-dollar business. It doubled the profit margins from 12% to 24%. And when each boat is $100,000, whether you make $12,000 or $24,000 a pop makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. So I shared that mistake that I made to point out that finding the clue of how to do it right is also available to all of us, but we need to think about it. So the neuroscience of communication that's hidden in that story is, first, we need to appeal to the croc brain. So 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter is a very croc brain friendly message, because it attracts curiosity. What do you mean 5 weeks of sun, fun, and tax shelter? That doesn't compute, but it's interesting. I like the sun, I like the fun, I like tax shelter. I don't know how this goes together. So it's a croc brain thing. And then the brochure that we gave them, was beautiful, gorgeous boats, people having fun. The next step is usually around something social. So the fact that you could see people on the boat, drinking and laughing and in bikinis and having fun. So it appealed to the social brain. Also, yachts appeal to status. And then the third step is, okay, give me the details. So I think a lot of salespeople shoot themselves in the foot by forgetting to do the first two steps and doing the mistake that I did, which is going way too deep into the weeds with all the features, all the benefits, all the details that you know about whatever you're selling, but too early.
Yeah, it happens. Different industries have greater problems with that. Um, the MSP world, they want to just show you a demo, right? And just, show you this great, cool, and all the things that are cool about it before they've done any qualification, drawn somebody in. So your tagline got people to probably physically lean in to learn a little bit more about what that meant, and if it applied to them. It's really, I look at it as slowing down
Mm-hmm.
to go faster. And some people, if I was going to buy a boat and I was interested in buying a boat, you would have got my attention. I would have saw that visual. I would have been drawn in by the social aspects of it and such. But if you said I could get a tax credit and you gave me the high level, I'm the kind of person that would be good with that. My wife would be the kind of person that would read the 122 pages and ask you 6 questions about it, right? That's too. So some people would be. What I've learned, and I'm just kind of curious as your thought, that some people want a lot of detail. Some people want enough to understand so that they can feel comfortable, but they don't. And if too much detail, they get confused or bored. Is that part of it?
Exactly right. So as you said, as you pointed out there, Walter, listening is a big part of it. So what I've learned now, I fumbled around and, by accident, sometimes really fell into a really clear and effective way of communicating by trial and error. Did lots of things. I'm like, oh, that didn't work. It's unfun and tax shelter. Oh, that really works. The phone is ringing off the hook. We're on TV. I guess that worked. But you always want to do these same 3 steps. So even the title of my book, Turn Words into Wealth, that appeals to the croc brain. Is it interesting? Is it new? Is it something I'm interested in? It's the category, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see here that the book's got award seals. So it won Outstanding Nonfiction Book of the Year in its category, which is writing and publishing. That hits the midbrain. And then the third step is I can tell you about the neuroscience of communication, or we can talk a little bit about 27X story that's in that book, or we could talk whatever, but you don't want to go on too long because, as you just said, Walter, some people want more data, but some people don't. And the other thing that we need to be cautious of when we're selling something is if we trigger the analyst brain, that is not the brain that buys. That is the brain that wants to think about it.
We want the emotional brain that is going to make that decision based on solving that problem that's frustrating them or concerning them. And then if we get them, you want that brain to get involved later to justify the expense.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So Turn Words into Wealth talks a lot about how to create your own $1 million message. I've launched multiple different businesses in different industries, and they each had, a strong message. That surprising one that I already shared with you, 5 Weeks of Sun, Fun, and Tax Shelter. Right now, I'm the founder of Same Page Publishing, and we're all about helping experts and entrepreneurs create best-selling, award-winning books that make a difference. So that's, kind of a clear, concise statement. And the title of the book, Turn Words into Wealth, is what we're about. So that's another example of $1 million message. Seth Godin's Purple Cow, that's an interesting example of $1 million message. So in the book, Turn Words into Wealth, I teach you how to make $1 million message and offer some examples.
But that's that idea of it's creative, right? You're using a formula, a formula of thinking about it. But the idea that we have to be creative can be threatening to some people, where they like, I'm not a creative person. I don't know how to write. I don't know how to think like that. And I disagree with that. I think everybody has the ability. They just need to put the effort and time into it. But how would you respond to somebody who's like, "That's not my thing. I'm not good at that," because it clearly
Well,
works.
it clearly works. And I think it's a skill that can be enhanced. So if you're saying you're not good at that, it just means you probably haven't spent enough time working on it, playing with it, considering it, and trying things and finding out what works. Like I said from the talent code at the beginning, I think all of us are able to get better at anything that we choose to. And if you're really not good at it, if you're dyslexic or something like that, you could delegate. Um, but I think two things on this. One, there's a hidden structure under effective communication. I'm also an award-winning screenwriter. I have a background as a film and television producer. Actually launched a company. We raised $5 million and made 8 films. So I've studied communication extensively for decades.
Mhm.
And what most people don't understand is when they have a good conversation with somebody, or they go to an interesting keynote speech, or even if they deal with a very successful salesperson, they just go, "Oh, that felt good. I liked it. I got it. I understood. I was engaged. I was entertained. I liked the stories. I liked the statistics. It all flowed smoothly." But usually there's a structure underneath that. It's usually invisible if you don't know it. I've studied screenwriting, so I can see the structure in any movie, and it takes away maybe a little bit of the enjoyment, or it adds another kind of enjoyment. But when we study the structure of a good sales call or a good keynote or a good podcast interview, then we can always be more effective, because like a blueprint for a house, you could take that blueprint, and a house needs a foundation, it needs walls, it needs a roof, it needs plumbing, but you can build a little house with that, or you could build a mansion with that, or you could build a castle with that. So by choosing to spend some time to learn some of the blueprints of communication, then you can always have those handy to create a framework to communicate with that'll work for you better. Does that make sense? It's like
It does, because
there's a hidden um,
well, with movies and screenplays, there's um, the Pixar kind of storylines. There's a variety of those storylines that help create a story arc. But in communication, just with a friend, or maybe with a prospect, um, we really need to bring our full attention onto that other person. And we use frameworks in sales to do that.
yeah,
Different frameworks to, I talk about being curious,
yeah,
genuinely curious, not this fake kind of curiosity, but being really curious about why somebody does something, having a little skepticism about why they're made that decision, or why they're doing something. A little empathy comes into play, I think, in sales, to understand somebody has a real problem that
yeah,
is serious, that needs to be corrected. And sometimes, in the medical field, that's life and death. And in sales, it could mean a promotion. It could mean something for somebody if they solve a big problem. It could be a lot of money. Um, and just that ability to listen and focus on the other individual.
hmm,
I've noticed with trying to get salespeople to do better at networking at an event, you know, focus on the individual. Like, somebody comes up to me and goes, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" Like, you know what? Nobody cares what I do. What do you do? And
yeah,
then they just start talking. And what happens? I'm listening. I'm asking some questions, and I'm really trying to decide if this person is somebody that, from a business perspective, I want to spend time with. Personally, I might, at a cocktail party, I could do the same thing. Whether this kind of person I would want to get to know better, but they're talking and they feel good because
yeah.
they're sharing and they're talking. And what I get is a big dossier on that individual, if I've listened. But
If
if I'm
you've
just
listened,
waiting to talk, it doesn't work.
most people are not listening. They're waiting to talk, as you were referring to there. Well, also, I think that all business is solving problems at a profit. So when we listen to the other person, we can hear what their challenges, what their problems, what their opportunities are, what the gap is between where they are now and where they would like to be. And if we have something that can help them bridge that gap, then we come in offering a solution to their situation, to their problem. Whereas if we start talking without listening, who knows? Maybe
How do
you
you know?
do.
How do you know if you can really help somebody? Because sales really
Exactly.
is about helping. If it's
Exactly.
done well, we should be trying to help somebody solve that problem. I had a conversation a few months ago with a gentleman who had a problem that was significant that I could help him with, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a $50,000 a month problem.
Wow.
And I said, "Well, is that a lot of money?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's a lot of money, you know." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay, well, is it enough money to do something?" And he's like, "Well, I've got a $500,000 a quarter problem that if I don't solve that, this problem doesn't matter."
Mm.
There was more urgency, there was more compelling reasons, right, for him to solve that bigger problem. And I'm like, "I can't help you with that.
Mm.
So if you don't solve that problem, the $50,000 problem doesn't matter. So I know somebody. Why don't I connect you and you guys decide if he can help you with this?" So I connected them. They started working on the problem. It's pretty much resolved. And so the guy that I had been talking to is appreciative. He's appreciative of the fact that I didn't try to slam him to solve the $50,000 problem. I actually
Yeah.
literally helped him solve the bigger problem. And we have an appointment for lunch in January because you'll have everything else put together so we can move forward. But if I wasn't listening and I wasn't really trying to help, you're going to talk yourself out of a sale, out of an opportunity by just talking and rather than listening.
And now he knows, likes, and trusts you because you were a stand for solving his bigger problem and you really listened. So that was awesome.
There's value, right? And I think that's part of what, if you're that sideline reporter at a football game, like they got to ask the coach 3 times and the producer's in their ear, right? They're not listening to that answer. They're just trying
Yeah,
to get their 3 questions in.
exactly. Well, you said you would like, before we started recording, you said you wanted to hear a little bit more about why people could benefit from writing a book. So
Yeah.
I've published, I think, 10 books, and then I'm also a ghostwriter and I help other people write books, which actually I do by a spoken author method. So people who have dyslexia or don't think they're writers find it easy because they just talk to me and then we turn it into a book. So that's easy. But what I wanted to share is a technique that people could do by themselves. And I use this in my own business when I wanted to pivot from one business to another. So I've had, I don't know, like 5 different businesses. So at the time, I was training coaches at the Grief Coach Academy. My husband had died. My wonderful husband that I had the yacht sales business with died young. And that triggered grief. And then I started the Grief Coach Academy a bit later after being a TV producer. And I'm an entrepreneur, so I got restless. People were more and more saying, how did you get on TV? How did you get on radio? How did you write so many books? And I thought, oh, well, maybe people would be interested in having me help them with their marketing, messaging, and book publishing. But who knows? People at that time knew me as the founder of the Grief Coach Academy. So what I did is I asked somebody who had interviewed me before. He was the director of coaching for Tony Robbins. He'd brought me in to train Tony Robbins coaches how to help people through grief and stress, whether it's heartbreak or divorce or death or bankruptcy. And I said, would you interview me about messaging and marketing? He's like, absolutely. I know that you're a serial entrepreneur. So he interviewed me about messaging and marketing. Of course, I choreographed the interview. Then I turned it into a little PDF using that, just a PDF I got on TV. And then I also turned it into a little book. It's called Marketing Fast Track. You can get it at an ebook for free at turnwordsintowealth.com. And basically, I offered the book to my list. This was a list of people who knew me as the founder of the Grief Coach Academy, mind you. So they got the book for free, but they just paid a couple of bucks for shipping and handling, $4.77. And then they got 5 videos that would explain how to attract capital, clients, and media coverage, how to create a $1 million message, and talk about, the value of writing a book. And then after they had that additional value, if they wanted to, they could set up and talk to me or somebody on my team with a business breakthrough call. And that little book, which was not even 100 pages at that point, basically was the lead magnet that generated $250,000 of new business in 90 days. And what it also did is it allowed me to go, yeah, I guess people do want my help with marketing and messaging. And I've sold the Grief Coach Academy now, somebody else is running it. And so that allowed me in a quick 90-day test to take basically a 90-minute interview, turn it into a short little book, and reach out to people in a way that built know, like, and trust, and that attracted people who wanted what I had to offer at that time. So then I pivoted my business. So, and anybody can do this. If you have something of value to share, you can just talk through. You could have somebody interview you, or you could talk it, onto your iPhone, or you could have somebody like me help you to turn the book into something of value. But it doesn't have to be long, and it could talk about what you're up to and add value, like we are both committed to doing on this podcast. And then if people want to know more, you can offer them to take the next step with you. So I took the ideas from the little book Marketing Fast Track and worked on it for 2 years and turned it into a much longer book, Turn Words into Wealth, which has got a blueprint for your business, brand, and book. So you can also do a larger book later once you've proven the success. And if you launch a little book and it doesn't pivot your business, then you have a result. Maybe you don't want to pivot your business in that direction. So you can also you can use a book to build an existing business that you already know is working, but you can also use a little book to see, oh, would this brand extension or would this pivot be well received?
Well, it being able, it's you're especially when you're doing what you did, is pivot out of one sort of segment to another larger, completely different segment.
Yeah.
But if you're staying somewhat adjacent to your world, it doesn't have to be 300 pages a book to get somebody to read it. If you give them, I mean, I'm working on a short little ebook to help launch a brand that is very specific, very niche, and that those pages are going to help explain why, it's going to help explain the how, and then it's going to help explain what the outcomes will be. And it'll be in 50, 60 pages of somebody that can whip through it in a cup of coffee or two, and it allows them to see that story and see if it fits what they're looking for. And it's going to tell me, I mean, I've tested this idea, but this will really help take it to the next level without having to go spend 2 years to write a book that really pushes out the whole thought and the whole idea to be really helpful.
Especially nowadays, people have such short attention spans. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a short book. And later, if you want to build it out, you can turn it into a 50,000 word book, but it can be a 50-page book to begin with. And it can be a very useful lead magnet. It can be a way to explain the value of what you're up to, add value, build know, like, and trust. And it can also repel people who aren't a good fit in a really efficient way. And although ebooks and audiobooks are kind of free to deliver digitally, I do like to suggest that getting a physical book in somebody's hands is beneficial, because then it's like a silent soldier, and it reminds the person about you, and it's easy for them to refer to the book and hand it to a friend or a family member. So you may even want to consider with your new book, proactively offering it to your list. Even if they pay shipping and handling, you probably could break even on that, but you could offer it as a PDF too. And I see like your Scale Your Sales book is very well reviewed on Amazon. I'm sure that helps establish your credibility and expertise and attracts clients for you.
Yeah, I think putting your thoughts on pages and putting it out into the world, there is a certain level of credibility and commitment to articulating your ideas and your thoughts. Um, and it is how I use the book to help somebody understand what I think the things are that really need to be addressed from a sales perspective. And when I give that book out, I send them 2 copies, and I
Mm.
write a note. And the note is, one copy is for you, and another copy is after you read it, you can gift it to a friend or an associate who you think might benefit from it without you having to give up your copy of it. So
That's
it's
smart.
yeah, it's not my idea. It was, but I thought it was a good idea, so I adopted it, or as they call it now, modeling. I'm modeling something. Um,
That's the highest compliment, is to emulate somebody else. Well, Dan Kennedy is also a big proponent of actually giving that wow factor by sending a physical book or sending a physical package of material. And he, if I remember correctly, I wrote about it in Turn Words into Wealth, which has got the exact detail, but I believe he said that it increased the effectiveness of sales calls 100-fold. So if people first get your book and then you follow up with the sales call, or you follow up with some other material, they're 100 times more likely to take your call and take a meeting than if you just try to do it without that. Because if with a book, you are an expert. I mean, the root of the word authority is author. So instead of showing up like, I don't know, a used car salesman, you're showing up like the authority or the author, and that can shift the dynamic considerably. So it's another asset to consider. And like you said, I initially thought that the value of a book was in the finished product, but there's so much value in just clarifying your thoughts and getting it down and getting the stories together, getting the statistics together. And then forever after, you can share those stories verbally, on video, what have you, and you've really fine-tuned the gold in your message.
clarity. I mean, what I was taught in English composition class back in high school was, clarity and brevity and unity. Those are the 3 important things when you're putting words to paper. And the shorter you're done editing when you can't take any more words out without
Yeah.
changing the meaning. So, I mean, there's some really great ideas. So, can you share the best way for people to reach out to you to get to know you a little bit better?
Absolutely. People can go to turnwordsintowealth.com if they'd like to see an example of a marketing funnel that's got, I call it the Thought Leader Launch Starter Kit. And that will share, 5 free videos that explain how to attract capital, clients, and media coverage. Or they can just go to samepagepublishing.com and they can see all of the people's books that I've helped them with. And they can also get a free business breakthrough call if they'd like to get some help with their book. I don't help people who are working on poetry books or that kind of thing, but it would probably be a good fit for anybody in your audience. So for business leaders or salespeople or experts, people who already have something on the go, who have a successful back end, can really benefit from a book. And I love helping people, create best-selling, award-winning books that make a difference. So they can go to samepagepublishing.com and find out more about that.
So we have both of those in the show notes, and I would encourage people to go take a look at that because there's some really good. I mean, if most people have a book in them, in my opinion, and that I think there's something in value of just getting those ideas out on paper, and you phrased it as like you have it there forever, and you can refer to it and help other people understand. So you would be able to help them. There's lots of resources on those 2 sites. So folks, go click on those in the link. I think there's some great value for you, even if you're not writing a book, just to help you put some thought and think differently about your current situation. It'll help you think a little differently, and that's what this is all about. So our last question. Any relationship, past or present, with cigars?
Well, I have asthma, so I'm not a smoker of any kind, but I do have a cigar story. So when my older brother was about 14, and my cousin was maybe 15, and he was living with us at the time. My father, who was a pipe and cigar smoker at that time, decided that he would let the boys smoke a cigar. And my brother turned green. I don't think he ever smoked again because it was just too much for the boys to smoke the cigar. My cousin, on the other hand, he did become a smoker, but not my brother. I think he just turned green. I did not. I was not invited. I was a girl, so I was not. I was not invited to smoke the cigar. But it was kind of a little funny family story. My dad was a big admirer of Hemingway, so he's also an author, and he liked the whole pipe situation. He thought that was very dignified, but occasionally smoked a cigar, and
Yeah, Hemingway.
that ended my brother's smoking days.
Hemingway did both of those, but I think everybody that's a cigar smoker has experienced your brother's um, greenness
Yeah.
by overindulging or not knowing what you're doing the first time. It's I think it's very different. I've never had a cigarette in my life. It's just nothing I've ever done. And my wife says, I started, 18 years ago, two bad habits one summer: cigars and golf.
Okay.
And they always go, to me, it was always a social thing. Golf, I was outside. Golf, I could be with my friends. Cigars was a natural part of that. So I learned kind of both of those. And to me, I just came back from an event, cigar event in Vegas. And what to me is what's interesting is that, there's 2,500 people in a room, and they're all demographics, all walks of life. Everybody's represented, and it didn't matter. You could sit down next to anybody, and you had that one thing in common.
Yeah.
Right? That brother and sister of a leaf is kind of how we refer to it. And it was always like, what are you smoking? Right. And you're off to the races into, sometimes shallow conversations, sometimes deep conversations, just due to the nature of what it is. But it was always fun. So,
well, the title of your podcast ticks off the crock brain first step of anything: sales and cigars. I like the flow of it. It's nice and concise. But sales and cigars, how do those two things go together, right? So it attracts interest. So it's a good first step for the crock brain. And then what you just said, it ticks off the second step too, because you've got that social connection immediately with anybody else who loves the leaf like you do.
But it's also the idea of attracting and repelling at the same time, right? I'm not for everybody. I know that. And I'm not trying to be. And cigars are a part of my life. And when I'm working with clients, I don't go to their office and light up and smoke cigars in their conference room, but it's usually part of, some level of celebration or some part of the conversations. And the podcast is just, two of my passions. So it's partly defining and attracting and repelling. And I think that's what we do in sales. If we do it right, we attract the people that we can help, and the people we can't, we sort of help.
And it just goes to show the power of a story. I didn't get to share the value that adding a story to whatever you say can up to 27-fold your revenue. So it's not to be ignored, adding a story. And you've got stories about cigars. I mean, Dan Kennedy shares stories about horse racing. And oftentimes those are the people that do business with him. They're not in the business of horse racing, but it's just a personal connection. It's a story, and it humanizes. And people love stories. They did a test with 100 different objects on eBay with a story or without a story. They were even transparent in what they were doing. And the 100 objects with a story sold for 2,700% more. So I want to invite all the listeners, apply the 80-20 rule. And in the 20% of high leverage activities is focusing on communication, become a better storyteller, story seller, I guess, and see how that changes your income and your impact.
That's awesome advice. And I think we'll land it there. Communication is critical. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I wish you well. Thanks.
Thanks.